Lucas had been a space explorer for years. It was a life full of excitement but also danger. He had explored countless planets, met strange creatures, and discovered secrets of the universe. Today, though, was different. He had been traveling through a part of space known for its storms. The cosmic winds howled around his ship, throwing it off course. The controls flickered, and the ship groaned under the pressure. Lucas's hands moved quickly over the controls, trying to regain stability. But it was clear that something had gone wrong. The ship's power started failing, and his instruments went dead one by one. A sudden jolt threw him against the seat. The ship was falling apart. The warning lights blinked wildly, and the ship's AI voice echoed in his ears. Warning, critical damage to engines, loss of control imminent. Damn it, Lucas cursed under his breath. He'd done this many times before, navigating through space storms, but this was different. The storm was stronger than anything he'd ever faced. There was a loud bang as the ship's hull cracked. Lucas gritted his teeth. He had only a few seconds before the ship was beyond repair. He tried to send out a distress signal, but the communication system was down. His only hope now was to find somewhere safe to land. He scanned the area and saw a dark shape looming in the distance. A planet? He was too far to tell, but there was no time to think. His hands moved over the controls in a desperate attempt to guide the ship toward the planet's surface. As the ship plunged downward, the atmosphere thickened around him. The temperature inside the cabin spiked, and smoke filled the air. He could barely breathe. The ship's alarm screamed in his ears, but he knew he had no choice but to brace for impact. The ground was coming fast. Then, everything went black. When Lucas woke up, his head was pounding. His eyes struggled to open, and the world around him spun. He took a deep breath, wincing at the sharp pain in his chest. His fingers brushed against the shattered glass of the cockpit. The crash had been brutal. Groaning, Lucas pulled himself out of the wreckage, his body aching. He looked around and saw nothing but chaos. The ship was half buried in the dirt, surrounded by alien trees that stretched high into the sky. The air smelled strange, almost metallic, and the sun was an unfamiliar hue. He stumbled out of the wreckage, his legs unsteady, his heart racing with the realization that he was alone. The storm that had wrecked his ship was gone, but the planet was still full of dangers. His communicator was dead, and the ship's AI was silent. He was stranded, far from home, with no way of knowing where he was. Lucas took a deep breath. There was no time to panic. He had to survive. The first thing he needed to do was find shelter and assess the damage. His mind raced as he surveyed the wreckage. The fuel was gone, the engines were destroyed, and the communication system was beyond repair. He wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. After taking stock of the situation, Lucas noticed something that gave him a small bit of hope. A dense forest stood nearby, its trees thick with leaves. It looked like it could offer some protection from the harsh elements. But he had to be careful. He didn't know what kind of creatures inhabited this planet, and he couldn't afford to take risks. Slowly, cautiously, Lucas made his way toward the trees, his steps unsteady on the rocky ground. He kept his senses sharp, alert for any sign of danger. The last thing he needed was to walk into the territory of a hostile alien species. The forest was quiet, except for the soft rustle of the leaves in the breeze. The air was thick with humidity, and Lucas's shirt clung to his back. The trees towered above him, their bark a deep purple color. Strange vines hung down from the branches, twisting like snakes. It was unlike anything he had seen before, but Lucas had seen enough to know that he had to be cautious. He walked for hours trying to find a place to rest. His body ached with every step, and his mind raced with the reality of his situation. There was no way to call for help, and no guarantee that anyone would come looking for him. He had to rely on his own survival instincts to get through this. Just as the sun began to set, Lucas spotted a small cave in the side of a hill. It wasn't much, but it would be enough for the night. He didn't want to risk wandering too far in the dark. He needed to rest, to think. With a sense of relief, Lucas made his way toward the cave. his exhaustion weighing heavily on him. The cave was cool and dry, a welcome change from the sweltering heat outside. Lucas sank down onto the ground, taking a deep breath. His mind raced, but he couldn't help feeling a sense of gratitude. He had survived the crash and he had found shelter. For now, that was enough. As he settled in, Lucas thought about the journey ahead. He didn't know what he was going to do or how he would get off this planet. But one thing was clear. He was going to have to rely on his wits and his strength. If he was going to survive here, he had to make it through the night first. Suddenly, there was a noise outside, a rustling in the bushes. Lucas froze. His heart pounded in his chest as he strained to listen. It was faint, but unmistakable. A soft, almost melodic sound. Like something moving through the trees. He held his breath, wondering if it was just the wind or if something else was out there. The sound grew louder, coming closer. Then, the shadows. In front of the cave shifted and Lucas's eyes went wide. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. A figure stepped out from behind the trees, a humanoid alien, with smooth, pale skin and long, flowing hair. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and she was tall, easily over 6 feet. The creature stood still for a moment, studying him. Lucas's mind raced. Should he run? Fight? Or was this creature friendly? The alien woman's expression was unreadable. She didn't move, but her eyes locked onto his, and Lucas felt a strange connection, something he couldn't explain. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to remain calm. She tilted her head as though trying to understand him. And then she spoke. "I will not harm you," she said, her voice soft but strong. "You have entered my land. Why do you not fight me?" Lucas was stunned. The creature spoke his language. He wasn't sure if this was some kind of illusion or if he was hallucinating, but he decided to take a chance. I didn't want to fight," Lucas replied, his voice hoarse from the crash. "I just wanted to survive." The alien woman studied him for a moment longer before stepping closer, her eyes never leaving his. "I will help you," she said simply, and with that, she reached out her hand. Lucas hesitated, but something in her voice told him he could trust her. Slowly, cautiously, he took her hand. In that moment, everything changed. Lucas had no idea who she was or what kind of world he had crashed on, but one thing was certain: he wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time since the crash, he felt a small spark of hope. Lucas sat in stunned silence as the alien woman's hand hovered before him, an unspoken promise of help in her touch. She was tall, with skin that shimmered like polished stone, and eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light of the cave. For a moment, Lucas wondered if he had dreamed her into existence. Was she even real? But then, he felt the warmth of her hand, firm and steady. She was real, and her presence calmed him in a way he couldn't explain. The alien woman, who had not yet introduced herself, gently pulled him to his feet. "You are hurt," she said, her voice soft, but carrying an air of authority. "You will not survive here alone." Lucas had been too exhausted to notice the full extent of his injuries. His body ached with the strain of the crash and his head throbbed from the impact. But he knew he couldn't stay here forever. He needed to get back to his ship, or at least to a place where he could start figuring out how to survive. He had no idea how long he would be stranded on this strange planet, but for now this alien woman was his only hope. "Thank you," Lucas said, though the words felt small and inadequate. "I didn't know what to do. I thought I was going to die." The alien woman didn't respond to his gratitude, but her expression softened ever so slightly. She looked at him for a long moment, then turned away, motioning for him to follow her. "Come," she said. "We have far to go." Lucas didn't question her. There was something about her, something deep in the way she carried herself, that made him trust her. His instincts told him that if he wanted to survive, Following her was his best chance. They walked in silence through the thick alien forest. The trees towered above them, their trunks twisted and covered in strange, glowing moss. The air was heavy with moisture, and Lucas could feel the humidity clinging to his skin. Every so often, he could hear the distant calls of creatures he couldn't see, their voices echoing through the trees. He couldn't help but wonder who this woman was, where she came from, and what she wanted with him. Was she part of a larger group, or was she a lone traveler like him? And why had she saved him? There were so many questions, but he knew better than to ask them just yet. She had her own reasons for helping him, and Lucas didn't want to push her too far. After walking for what felt like hours, they came upon a clearing. In the center of the clearing stood a large structure made of smooth, metallic-looking material. It shimmered in the light, like it was part of the landscape itself, blending seamlessly with the natural surroundings. It was unlike anything Lucas had ever seen before. No human civilization had ever built anything like it. The woman stopped at the entrance to the structure and turned to Lucas. "Inside. Rest," she instructed. "You will be safe." The days passed slowly for Lucas in the alien sanctuary. At first, he spent most of his time resting and recovering from the crash. The strange energy of the platform had healed his injuries quickly, but his body was still weak from the stress. His mind was full of questions, each one more pressing than the last. The alien woman, whose name he had learned was Lyra, rarely spoke of herself. She was kind, but distant, always watching him with her glowing eyes, as if she could see straight into his soul. She fed him strange fruits from the trees outside, their taste unlike anything he had ever experienced, sweet and tangy in ways he couldn't describe. But despite her kindness, there was an air of tension between them. She seemed to be waiting for something, and Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that his presence on this planet was more important than he realized. One morning, as he sat near the entrance of the sanctuary, trying to make sense of his situation, Lyra approached him, her movements as fluid as the wind. Her expression was unreadable, as always, but today there was a certain intensity in her gaze. "You are healed now," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a decision. "But you are not ready." Lucas furrowed his brow. "Not ready for what?" "For the planet," she replied. "It is dangerous. You will not survive here unless you learn to adapt." She paused, her eyes scanning the horizon. "The world is harsh, and it does not care for the weak." Lucas stood up slowly, his legs still a little shaky. "What do you want me to do?" Lyra looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing something in her mind. Then she spoke. "Come with me." Without waiting for him to respond, she turned and walked into the forest. Lucas hesitated for only a second before following her. His heart was pounding, but there was something in Lyra's tone that made him feel like he had no choice but to comply. They walked for hours, deeper into the dense jungle. The trees here were taller, their branches twisting and reaching toward the sky, creating a canopy that blocked out the sun. The air was thick with humidity, and Lucas could feel his clothes sticking to his skin. Every so often, he would hear strange sounds from the shadows, the calls of creatures he couldn't see. Finally, they arrived at a clearing, and Lucas's eyes widened at the sight before him. In the center of the clearing stood a large, circular structure made of stone and metal, its surface covered in intricate carvings. It looked ancient, older than anything he had ever seen. "This is the trial grounds," Lyra explained. "Here you will prove your worth." "Trial grounds?" Lucas repeated. He didn't understand. "What do you mean, prove my worth?" Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. "You will undergo 3 trials. If you succeed, you will be ready to survive on this planet. If you fail, you will not leave this place alive." Lucas swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. "What kind of trials?" "Physical, mental, and emotional," she said simply. "The trials will test everything you are. They will push you to your limits." Lucas didn't have much time to process this information before Lyra gestured for him to follow her into the structure. Inside, the air was cooler and the walls were lined with strange symbols that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Lyra led him to a large, flat platform in the center of the room. It looked like a stage, surrounded by more of those glowing symbols. "This is the first trial," she said, her voice echoing in the quiet space. "You must defeat the Guardian." "The Guardian?" Lucas asked, his voice trembling slightly. Before Lyra could answer, the ground beneath them rumbled, and the platform began to shift. A loud mechanical noise filled the room, and the walls around them lit up, casting eerie shadows. Suddenly, a large figure emerged from the shadows. It was a creature unlike anything Lucas had ever seen. Tall, muscular, and covered in thick armored plating. Its eyes glowed red, and it let out a low, growling noise as it stepped forward. Lucas's heart raced. The creature looked like a cross between a predator and a machine, its movements smooth and calculated. It was clear that it wasn't alive in the traditional sense. It was some kind of guardian, a test, a challenge to overcome. "Fight," Lyra said simply. Lucas took a deep breath, his mind racing. He wasn't a fighter. He had never been trained for anything like this. But he knew that he had no choice. He couldn't run. He had to survive. The Guardian took a step toward him, its massive fist raised. Lucas instinctively dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the blow. The creature's fist crashed into the ground with a deafening thud, sending rocks flying into the air. For a moment, Lucas stood frozen, staring at the creature in disbelief. But then he remembered something Lyra had said. This was a test. It wasn't about defeating the Guardian with strength alone. He had to outsmart it. Lucas scanned the room quickly, his eyes landing on a pile of debris near the edge of the platform. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was his only chance. With his heart pounding in his chest, he ran toward the debris, grabbing a piece of metal that had been broken off from the wall. The Guardian was fast, and it followed him closely, swinging its fist again. Lucas ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the attack. He turned and swung the metal piece at the creature's head, hoping to find a weak spot. But the Guardian's armor was too thick. He had to think. He had to be smarter than this thing. Lucas took a deep breath, his mind racing. He noticed something. The creature's movements were predictable. It didn't seem to react to anything except his physical movements. It was as if it was following a set pattern. Lucas put his plan into action. He waited until the Guardian swung its fist again, and then he darted to the side, grabbing a large rock from the ground. He tossed it high into the air, just above the Guardian's head. The Guardian's eyes followed the rock, its attention distracted for just a moment. That was all Lucas needed. He ran behind the creature, using the debris to climb up onto its back. The Guardian tried to shake him off, but Lucas held on tight, using the rock as leverage to push himself further up. Finally, he reached the top of the Guardian's head. He could see the weak point, a small panel embedded in its metal skull. With all his strength, Lucas drove the piece of metal into the panel. The Guardian let out a mechanical scream as its body froze, the lights in its eyes flickering before going dark. The creature collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud, its body lifeless. Lucas stood there for a moment, panting heavily, his heart racing. He had done it. He had survived the first trial. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes unreadable. "Well done," she said, her voice soft. "You passed the first trial." Lucas swallowed hard, still trying to process what had just happened. "What now?" he asked. His voice shaky. Lyra didn't answer immediately. She just motioned for him to follow her out of the structure. "The next trial begins tomorrow," she said simply. Lucas didn't sleep much that night. His mind kept replaying the events of the trial. He had defeated the Guardian, but it hadn't been easy. It felt like the whole world had been watching him, every move scrutinized by the unseen forces of the planet. Now, as the sun rose the next morning, his body ached from the physical exertion and his mind was filled with questions. He stood outside the sanctuary, his gaze drifting over the strange landscape. The sky above was a strange hue, unlike anything he had ever seen. The sun was rising in the distance, casting a golden light over the forest that stretched endlessly before him. But even in the beauty of the scene, there was something unsettling. He had passed the first trial, but he didn't feel victorious. There was still a long way to go. Lyra had told him that the next trial would be even more difficult. But she hadn't explained what it would involve. He didn't know if he was ready. The first trial had been a test of strength and strategy, but what came next? As he stood there, lost in thought, Lyra approached him. She was silent, as always, her expression unreadable. But there was something different in her eyes today, something darker, more intense. "You passed the first trial," she said, her voice steady. "But the next trial is not just a test of your body. It is a test of your mind and your heart." Lucas nodded, trying to steady his racing thoughts. "What do I have to do?" Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly, and she took a step closer to him. "You will face the second trial tomorrow. But before you do, there is something you must understand. The planet is alive in a way that you do not yet understand. It is not just a place to survive. It is a place to connect." "Connect?" Lucas repeated. "How do you mean?" Lyra looked away, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "The Kyrexians, my people, have lived on this planet for centuries. We are in tune with it, in a way that you cannot yet imagine. But you are not from this world, and that makes you different. You must learn to connect with it if you want to survive." Lucas was quiet for a moment, trying to process her words. He had always been a man of logic and reason, a person who solved problems with his mind. The idea of connecting with the planet, of becoming one with it, was foreign to him. But if it was the key to surviving, he had no choice but to try. Lyra's gaze returned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart beat faster. "The second trial will push you in ways you cannot predict. You must be ready." Dao. Words hung in the air between them. Lucas didn't know what to say. He had come to this planet with the expectation of surviving, until he could get off. But now, it seemed like survival was only a small part of the story. There was something. Lucas stood at the edge of the clearing, his mind racing. The second trial had been far more intense than he had ever imagined. The fear, the darkness, it had nearly overwhelmed him. But somehow, he had found the strength to face it. As he stood in the bright light of the alien forest, he knew the third trial was coming. Lyra hadn't said much about it, but Lucas could feel the weight of it pressing down on him. Each trial had been harder than the last, and this one would surely be no different. Lyra had been quiet since the trial, her eyes filled with a mix of approval and something else. She had said little, but Lucas could sense that she was proud of him. It was strange. He had never expected to find himself here, on an alien world, facing challenges that seemed impossible. Yet with each test, he felt himself growing stronger, more capable. But a question lingered in his mind. What was the third trial? He had survived the first two, but what more could the planet throw at him? As if sensing his thoughts, Lyra approached him. Her movements were graceful and deliberate, and for the first time, Lucas noticed the weariness in her expression. She had been guiding him through the trials, but there was a heaviness in her eyes, a weight of responsibility that she hadn't shown before. "The third trial is different," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "It will test not only your strength but your heart." "My heart?" Lucas repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" Lyra looked at him for a long moment before answering. "The third trial is a test of sacrifice. It is about what you are willing to give up in order to survive. The planet will ask something of you, something you may not want to give." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't understand. What could the planet want from him? He had already faced the fear and the struggle. What more could be left? "You are not just surviving here, Lucas," Lyra continued, her voice soft but firm. "You are becoming part of this world. It asks for a price, and you must decide if you are willing to pay it." Lucas didn't know what to say. He felt uneasy, like something important was at stake. He had come to this planet with the hope of survival, but now he was being asked to give something of himself, something he wasn't sure he was ready to give. Lyra looked at him once more, her eyes filled with understanding. "The trial begins now," she said simply. The ground beneath Lucas's feet began to tremble, and he felt a deep hum vibrate through the air. It was as if the planet itself was alive, responding to Lyra's words. The trees around them shifted, their leaves rustling in the growing wind. Lucas's heart raced as the world around him began to change. Suddenly, a bright light filled the clearing, and Lucas had to shield his eyes from the intensity. When the light faded, he found himself standing in a place that was both familiar and strange. It was a reflection of his own world, Earth, but it was different. The sky was darker, the air heavier, and the land was desolate, like it had been, ravaged by some great force. In the distance, Lucas saw a figure. At first he thought it was Lyra, but as he stepped closer, he realized it was someone else, someone he knew. It was his father, standing alone in the barren landscape. "Dad," Lucas whispered, his voice trembling. The figure turned toward him, and Lucas's heart skipped a beat. His father looked just as he remembered, but there was something wrong. His eyes were empty, devoid of the warmth and kindness Lucas had always known. The figure spoke, his voice echoing in the stillness. "You've come to this world, but you are not ready. The planet requires something from you." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "What does it want?" His father's figure pointed toward a distant mountain where a storm was raging. The sky was dark, and lightning flashed across the sky. "The storm is coming," the figure said. "If you want to survive, you must make a choice. You must leave everything behind." Lucas's mind raced. What did it mean? Leave everything behind. Was this the trial? The sacrifice? He turned back to the figure of his father. "I don't understand," he said, his voice breaking. "What do I have to do?" The figure remained silent for a long moment. Then slowly, it spoke again. "The planet asks for your heart. It demands that you leave the world you know behind. If you stay, you will never leave. If you choose the planet, you will never see your home again." Lucas's heart pounded in his chest. The words hit him like a punch. Was this the test? Was he being asked to choose between his life on Earth and his survival on this alien planet? The world around him seemed to swirl, and the figure of his father began to fade, replaced by a vision of Lyra. She stood before him, her face calm, but filled with sorrow. "The planet is alive, Lucas," she said softly. "It is not just a place. It is a living, breathing being, and it requires a price for its gift. You must decide. Will you stay and become one with it, or will you leave and return to your world?" Lucas's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. He couldn't imagine leaving Earth behind. His family, his friends, everything he had ever known, it was all there. But the planet had offered him something too, something beyond his wildest dreams. "I don't want to lose everything," he said quietly, "but I don't know if I can leave this world behind." Lyra stepped forward, her eyes filled with understanding. "The sacrifice is not just physical. It is emotional, spiritual. You must decide what is worth more to you, your survival here or your life back home." Lucas stood in silence, his heart torn between two worlds. On the one hand, he longed to return to Earth, to be with his family, to leave this strange planet behind. But on the other hand, he had come to care for Lyra, and the planet had offered him something he had never known. A sense of purpose, a connection to something greater than himself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lucas spoke. His voice was steady, though his heart was heavy with the weight of his decision. "I choose to stay," he said. "I choose this world. I choose to be part of it." Lyra's eyes softened, and for the first time, Lucas saw a flicker of emotion in her face. "You have made the right choice," she said quietly. "The planet will accept your sacrifice." As the words left her lips, the world around them seemed to shift. The storm in the distance began to fade and the land around them brightened. The air felt lighter, as though a weight had been lifted. Lucas felt a strange sensation in his chest, as though something deep within him had changed. He had made his choice, and the planet had accepted it. But what did that mean for him now? What would happen next? Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. "The trial is over," she said. "You have passed. You are now part of this world." Lucas took a deep breath, looking around at the landscape, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He had made his decision, and now he was ready to face whatever came next. The sun hung low in the sky as Lucas stood at the edge of the clearing, looking out at the horizon. The events of the last few days had left him feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. He had faced the trials, overcome his fears, and made a choice. Now the planet had accepted him, and he was no longer just a visitor. He was part of it. Lyra stood beside him, her presence comforting yet silent. She had been by his side through every trial, guiding him, testing him, and ultimately offering him a way to survive in this strange world. But now, with the trials behind them, Lucas felt a strange sense of peace. He had made his decision, and he was ready to live it. "You did well," Lyra said quietly, her voice filled with a rare softness. "The planet has chosen you." Lucas glanced at her, his heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "I didn't know what to expect," he admitted, "but now it feels like everything is different." "It is different," Lyra replied. "You have chosen to become part of this world. The bond between you and the planet is stronger now. You are no longer just a stranger here." Lucas felt a deep sense of connection to the planet, more than he had ever felt before. It was as though the land, the air, and even the trees understood him. It was a strange feeling, but not an uncomfortable one. It was as though he had found his place, even though he wasn't sure exactly what that meant yet. "But what happens now?" Lucas asked. "What's next for me?" Lyra's eyes softened. "Now you begin your new life. You will live here, among the Chyrexians, and you will learn what it means to truly belong to this world." Lucas turned his gaze back to the landscape. The sky had turned a soft shade of purple as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the alien forest. The trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the air smelled of something sweet and unfamiliar. Lyra's words echoed in his mind. "You are no longer just a stranger here." He had come to this planet in search of survival, and now it seemed he had found something far more important: belonging. He wasn't sure how it had happened, but somehow he had become a part of this world, as much a part of it as the creatures that roamed the land and the trees that reached toward the sky. As the days passed, Lucas found himself adjusting to his new life. The Chyrexians, though not many in number, welcomed him with open arms. They treated him as one of their own, and he learned quickly. Lyra had been his guide, but now he was learning from others. He had never imagined that he would find himself living on an alien world, but here he was, thriving in a way he never thought possible. He had always been a man of logic, of reason. He had never believed in magic or the strange mysteries of the universe. But now, on this world,